Hello and welcome to the Career Changers. Our guest today is Andrew Barnes, founder of 4 Day Week Global, Perpetual Guardian, and Cutter Barnes Group of Companies. Innovator, entrepreneur, and philanthropist, Andrew Barnes has made a career of market-changing innovation and industry digitization. Most recently, in New Zealand, Andrew triggered a revolution of the entire fiduciary and legal service industry and a transformation he has led as the founder of Perpetual Guardian has positive implications both locally and globally. The result has seen him establish 4 Day Week Global and the 4 Day Week Global Foundation with his partner, Charlotte Lockhart. The vision for this is to provide a community environment for companies, researchers, and academics, and interest parties to be able to connect and advance this idea as part of the future of work. Through this work, is on the advisory boards of both the US and Ireland 4 Day Week campaigns and the board of the newly created Wellbeing Research Center at Oxford University. In 2019, he wrote the 4 Day Week book as a how-to guide for companies trying to reduce work hours and increase productivity. Through this work, is on the advisory board of the Wellbeing Research Center at Oxford University. Today, Andrew is going to talk about his career and how the 4 days working week can make the world a better place. Hi, Andrew. Thank you so much for joining us.
Hi, Eliza. Good to be here.
So let's start a little bit with your background. How did you start your professional life, or better, what was your first job?
Well, I guess my first job was actually as an archaeologist, and then sort of combined to that, I was a naval officer. So I didn't really start in the conventional, finance business world. In fact, if I'm being honest, my family was full of artists. I was a little bit of a freak that I headed off into business rather than continuing to do art.
So what was your dream job when you were a child?
I wanted to be an archaeologist. And if I didn't want to be an archaeologist, I wanted to be a naval officer. hence why I did. But
well, that's great.
But the problem is there's no money in archaeology. It's very, what's the word? It's very, Indiana Jones. You think it's fabulous, it's great, it's spectacular. But actually, sort of detail work, very little is spent out there in the field in somewhere exotic, digging something interesting up. And so that really was rejected pretty early. I was doing some largely unpaid work on that, and then joined the Navy. And that was Margaret Thatcher first term. If people can remember that, basically the Royal Navy pre the Falklands was not a very happy place, and so I came out of the Navy after about 3 years and then said, okay, I need to settle down and do something serious. And that was when I moved, into banking, finance, and a rather more conventional career.
So what did you do after that?
Well, I joined NatWest in the retail bank, and then transferred across to their merchant bank in the City of London called County Bank. And I really stayed with them all the way until I actually went to Australia in 1987. And in 87, I transferred actually to another bit of the NatWest group, but in this time in Australia, and then from then to other companies, and was moving around in different bits of the organization. But I actually broadly stayed with the company for about five, 6 years.
So based on your background, what can you identify as the highlights of your career?
Oh gosh. Well, look, I mean, I think I did interesting stuff throughout my career, but I guess the highlights, I floated realestate.com.au on the ASX. It's still one of the most successful digital businesses to come out of Australia. We then did, the Perpetual Guardian group, which has been a great success story. I acquired that back or the first bit of that in 2013, and we built that up. And then we sold a fairly large chunk of it to Tricle, which is based out of Hong Kong, last year. So if I look at highlights of my career, but I guess I also sold Best Invest, a British funds management business, to 3i as well. So, I've done some very big transactions at different times in different countries. And I've been lucky enough to be able to do that.
Mm. So let's talk about the topic of the podcast, the 4 days working week. So 100 years ago, we moved from working 6 days a week to 5, 6 days a week to 5, and we are overdue for an update. The 4-day work week is a reduction in the work week from a standard 40 hours to 32 hours for the same pay and benefits. This reduction has been proven to work for employees and employers. COVID-19 made it also clear that we can find a better balance between work and life. Let's make the move together. So I took this extract from your website, your community. How and when did you start thinking about the 4 days working week? And what was the first catalyst for this thought?
Well, to be honest, it was flying to London, and I read a series of articles in the UK Economist magazine, which were talking about productivity, and specifically the productivity in the United Kingdom and productivity in Canada. And the reports, the evidence suggested that in fact people were only productive for 2.5 hours a day. In fact, in the Canadian survey, it was 1.5 hours a day. And I wondered what was causing bad productivity. Why were people only productive for a limited portion of the day? And was that occurring in my own business? And I had the thesis that that was to do with how we were working, the construct of offices, and also the impact of our lives at the time when we were in the office. If both family members are working, then inevitably somebody has to pick up during working hours an issue that's caused by a child being sick or needing to deal with trying to solve a problem at home. So my thesis was, would I get a higher output if I gave people more time to work well, whether this made a difference, was to run an experiment. And so we ran the Perpetual Guardian trial in 2018. And at the same time, what in hindsight was a stroke of genius, but at the time was a fluke, we engaged a couple of academics to do some research on what was actually happening in the business. And that was the thing that opened my eyes. So it was a very narrowly focused idea to see if I could improve productivity. And that was the journey that set us down the path that we've been on, ever since.
Mm. The conversation about the 4 days working week is all over the world. We encourage business, employees, researchers, and government to all play their part in creating a new way of working, which will improve business productivity, worker health outcomes, stronger families and communities, and challenge the gender equality issue and work towards a more sustainable work environment. To do so, you and Charlotte Lockhart created 4-Day Week Global, a not-for-profit community to provide a platform for like-minded people who are interested in supporting the idea of the 4-day work week as a part of the future of work. What were the first steps of this project and how has it developed over time since 2018?
Right. Well, what happened, I think, is we ran the trial in Perpetual Guardian, and I'll be honest, I thought we were going to get an article in the New Zealand Herald, maybe something on television. We were hit with an absolute firestorm of media around the world. When we announced what we were doing, when we announced the results of the trial, and then when we announced that we were making it a policy, text dozens of articles around the world. I mean, I think it was technically we stopped counting at about 12,000 articles, and we were being interviewed by people from all over the world. And also we had company after company that contacted us and said, how did this work? How could we do it? And they were looking at the results that we got from the trial, which was that productivity had gone up to about 125%. We'd also got things like engagement, empowerment, enthusiasm, enrichment scores had gone up 40%. We then got other issues with stress levels dropping 15% and then impacts around things like sick days dropping. So on its face, it was a win-win-win. The company was winning, the employees were winning, and ultimately, by extension, families were winning. So we thought initially that what we would do is we would just share the information on the website, the 4-Day Week website, and we put things up there so people could, if they read about it, could come and have a look. We then found that people wanted more information, so we then published a white paper. I think that's been accessed by about 11,000 companies around the world so far. Plus, we kept getting these requests for mentoring. How did you do it? So I wrote a book because, frankly, in the end, I couldn't drink that much coffee with chief executives and say this is what was happening. And that then morphed again into 4-Day Week Global, which was talking about trying to encourage how we encourage companies around the world to trial this and how we continue to have a dialogue with government. And that's really been the journey of the last 4 years. We now have, 6 people in the organization across the world. And we're currently running trials in Australia, New Zealand, the USA, Canada, the United Kingdom, Ireland, and we're going to be doing some work in Spain and other European countries. And then we've just announced that the second US pilot is now going to start recruiting. So it's gone from this accidental experiment to something that's broadly absorbing a large chunk of my time now and Charlotte's time. Because, not to put too fine a point on it, you don't get many chances to change the world. And for better or for worse, this happens to be us.
Yeah, definitely. Since the project was born, have you found, I guess so, any resistance about the 4 days working week? And what are the most common objections?
Well, look, the real problem, I think, is that business leaders are all very much of a type in a way. First of all, we all think we have the answers to every single problem. That's why we're leaders. We get to the top because we're good at making decisions, good at implementing things, good at finding solutions. But we're also conditioned. And certainly, you know, if I look at my own background working in London, I was absolutely conditioned that working longer is working harder. At no point was there a discussion about working smarter and working less. And so the biggest issue I think that we have is that business leaders take a very, or some business leaders take a very firm view that this is not going to work and it would never work in my company. Somehow their business, their industry is not capable of rethinking how it works and how the people who work in that industry work. Now, usually that's because they say we're all terribly busy, and how can we stop doing that? Or it will be that, well, it wouldn't work because we've got to stay open all the time, you know, and that's often an argument that's run for medicine or for education or manufacturing, and it wouldn't work for people who build by the hour. The problem is that somewhere in the world, there is a company in that industry that has adopted the 4-day week, has successfully implemented it, has got better productivity, and is moving forward. And so a lot of this is just the fear of, why would I change what I'm doing? What's in it for me? If I keep doing what I'm doing, I'm still going to be successful. If I try this and it goes wrong, I might be blamed for it. So a lot of that is this inertia, if you will, that sits around rethinking how we work in the 21st century. And the other argument that comes up, which is quite a regular one, is, well, how do you measure productivity? And I love that one, because that effectively says, actually, we're not measuring productivity. We're using time as a surrogate for productivity. And that argument now, just, I think certainly post-pandemic, doesn't wash.
So each of us, with our choices, can have a positive impact into the world. How do you feel the 4 days working week can make the world a better place?
Oh, look, I think in numerous ways. I'm going to start, I think, at the base level, that, you know, we are faced with crises in health, in issues that are health related around things like obesity, around family cohesion, around care responsibilities and how those are shared. We've also got a whole question of environment and how we reduce carbon footprints. And then you've got other issues which are equality-based issues, things around, you know, gender, ensuring that men and women both have equal access to get to the C-suite, as well as able to share appropriately care responsibilities. And you'll find in some countries, for example, Ireland, 98% of care responsibilities are handled by women. So what the 4-day week does is it recognizes at the heart that there is no such thing as a free lunch. That if we are to change working patterns and reduce working hours, it is important that business is able to continue to function. After all, you know, business needs to be profitable, to pay the taxes, to support the social infrastructure that we need. So one of the key pillars of our policy is it's a very much a business focused approach to argue that this is a sensible change that actually improves productivity of organizations, companies, and businesses. However, what you then start to look at is the social impact. The fact that people suddenly have more time to upskill themselves. Now, this is quite critical. If an era of AI coming in and maybe 40% of jobs disappearing, you're going to need to find a way to enable people to reach by AI. 4-day week by giving you more time does that. You think about our children now are largely, in a funny sort of way, brought up in care because both parents are working. You don't have the time that you used to do to have time together as a family. Now, the 4-day week addresses that, especially reduced hours working, because, you know, for example, in our company, we can allow people to work 5 days but compressed hours. A huge benefit to families. You then have a thing if people don't go into work and stay at home, linked to what's happening with working from home, that has a significant environmental impact. I mean, UC Davis, when it did some research on this, said not going into work is one of the most environmentally things that you can do. And then you look at issues around, say, health, you know, with 1 in 4 or 1 in 5 of the workforce at a point in time having a stress or mental health issue. Now, if we can give people more time to decompress, more time to recharge their batteries, balance things out, that not only has a material impact on them, but on their families, and then by extension on society. So, you know, I'm increasingly of the view that although this is not a silver bullet, it is an important step towards redressing the benefits of, you know, productivity improvement that's occurred in the last 20, 30, 40, arguably 100 years, where often the spoils are concentrated at one level, often the top levels in organizations. And what this does is this seeks to redress that balance by improving the lives of everybody in all organizations, in all walks of life, so that they can have a better quality of life, whilst at the same time, you know, as I said, the key drivers of productivity, profitability, which are necessary to pay for that, to pay to see that this has the real possibility to materially change our world for the better.
Let's talk about the pilot project. The pilot is a coordinated 6-month trial of a 4-day working week with no loss in pay for employees. Currently, as you mentioned before, there are running pilot programs in the United States, Canada, the UK, Ireland, Australia, and New Zealand. And you're launching new programs every quarter in different regions. When did you launch the first pilot project?
Well, technically, actually, the first one, the idea for the first one came out of some work we were doing with the Irish 4-day week campaign. And they were running what I thought was a very successful campaign with the tagline, better for everyone. And they'd got a lot of interest groups together. And so the idea really came out of that was that it would be easier if companies experimented about this together. It's a do this, and instantly their shareholders, the rest of their leadership team often say, this is crazy, you know, how are we going to do it? And there's a lot of uncertainty. So if you run a pilot program where you're doing it with a lot of other companies and there's a community, there is ability to not just share experiences, but there's safety in numbers a little bit in terms of having other people on the journey with you. And what we've done around that is that we recognized that the research program that we did back in New Zealand was actually the key difference. In a lot of experiments in this space, nobody had really done academic research alongside an experiment. Often the experiment itself was all it was, but there was no external validation. And so what we did is we then linked Boston College, or Juliet Shaw out of Boston College, with University College Dublin in that case, to actually run the research there. And that has subsequently evolved into this global research program, which also now involves, Oxford and Cambridge universities and a local university in each of the jurisdictions in which we're running the trials. And so what this does is we give workshops and advice to companies on how to implement it. We appoint mentors, usually a company in the same industry that mentors the company that's coming in. We run the research alongside, and what that means is that you can objectively measure the impact of the 6-month trial. And that means at the end of the trial, we're quietly confident that you can go back to your stakeholders and say, look, productivity did this, work-life balance did this, the impact on our staff is this, and then hopefully, and the next wave of research, and the impact on society looks like this. And so the idea around it is it's a community that enables people to do a experiment in working shorter hours, but more safely and effectively, rather than just trialing it out on their own.
What happens once the pilot project is over?
Hopefully, all the companies have converted themselves to permanently working 4 days a week. I mean, that's the idea. The objective is that people use this as a stepping stone to the policy. Now, I should say, of course, the world has changed materially. And there are companies now on the journey to implementing 4-day reduced hours working. And a large number are going through our pilot programs, but actually there's a whole heap of companies that have just persuaded themselves rightly that this is a great idea, and they are going down that journey independently. We talk to thousands of companies who are on that journey. But in a lot of cases, especially owner-run businesses, they can make the decision and they live with the consequences. It's usually those businesses that have external stakeholders that want a rather more formalized structure. But we expect that companies at the end of the trial will keep it as a permanent policy.
How can a company join a pilot project?
Well, we usually, with 4-day week website, usually has the announcements when we're doing it. We also go out in the media, and we know that we run information sessions. For example, the UK pilot that's now just starting, I think we had about 700, 800 companies that came through the information sessions. We had to close those off. It got out of control. And so that then led to the largest ever pilot that's ever been conducted in this. And we had to again close that off. So it's really a question of keeping an eye on our website, the media announcements. And when we announce another pilot program, come along to one of our information sessions We're just running them again for the United States. And come along and then sign up for one of the pilots. The only condition we place on an applicant is that we're very clear on what this is. This is the 100-80-100 rule. 100% pay, 80%. It's not, 80% pay, 80% time. That's not how this works, right? It's about full pay and reduced hours. Now, if a company says, look, I can only get to 4.5 days, that's okay, provided the principle is it's still 5 days pay. So that's the only hurdle that you actually have to jump to come on the pilot program is commit to reduced hours working without a reduction of pay.
And well, I assume that while there is a need to convince in some ways employees are all very excited about this initiative. How can individuals become advocates of the 4 days working week and persuade their own boss to join a pilot project? I look at your website and I've seen that there is an option to join some online workshops.
Yeah, look, I mean, well, look, the quick way to do it is rush out, buy a copy of my book and leave it on his desk or her desk. I mean, but seriously, actually, this is an issue, right? So quite often we are approached by individuals who say, look, I'd like to introduce this into my company as an idea, but I'm nervous about bringing it in because I don't want this to be misinterpreted. And what we say really there is, if there are these feedback sessions and there are these conversations going on as to what you could or could do in the organization, is to always talk the language of business. I'm a businessman first and foremost. I didn't approach this as a social campaigner. I approached this to answer an academic question about whether I could make my company better. It did make my company better. It is a rational, sensible business decision. So if you actually phrase that, your idea, in the language of business, it is far less threatening, because you're really saying to people, look, I've seen the evidence out there that productivity is going up. Increasingly, there's a second issue, which I think all companies are facing post-COVID, which is the Great Resignation. You're seeing it being very difficult to attract and retain the right type of talent. And at the moment, the balance of power has shifted from the employer to the employee if you want to attract people. So again, an argument to your boss is that we are finding it very hard to recruit. We're finding it very hard to hang on to quality staff. This is potentially a solution to that. And the beauty is that if it's a trial, if it doesn't work, you can always go back to the way you worked before. So the beauty of our argument really is it's like an experiment. Now, why wouldn't you try something that has the potential to make your company more profitable or more effective, raise your profile, to attract better staff and to cut staff turnover, to cut, sick days, all of those things that the evidence now suggests is that there are enough companies to doing this. That means that the body of research, the body of evidence is far stronger than it was 4 years ago. So you can talk about this with confidence, knowing that this is actually the impact of the policy. And that's why I think you can have it with your boss and say, well, look, why not? Let's have a look at it. Why not have a look at it? And the worst that can happen is, having had a look at it, you decide the time is not yet right. But if you don't investigate it, what are you saying? You're saying that the way you do things today is the pinnacle of human achievement?
So, well, we are reaching the end of this episode, and it's been very insightful to listen to everything about the 4 days working week and the positive impact it is having around the world. Can you share with us some interesting or funny stories about the 4 days working week?
Well, look, maybe the one that jumps out for me, my own personal journey. And I think, in fairness, this is the point at which I realized that this was bigger than anything I'd ever imagined, was that Charlotte and I did the Peking to Paris classic car rally in 2019. So the year after we had done the experiment in Perpetual Guardian, and probably about 6 months after the policy had become permanent. And we were driving through Siberia, pretty remote end of Siberia, heading to a city called Novosibirsk. And the phone rang. And we answered the call, and it was our team in New Zealand, and they said, you've just been name checked by the Prime Minister of Russia, who has just said that he's seen the Perpetual Guardian trial. He's looked at the work that you've done, and he thinks it's the future for Russia. Put the phone down. And we're driving a little bit further, and then they say the phone rings again. We pick it up. They said, "Where are you?" "Well, we're heading to Novosibirsk. We'll be there probably tomorrow." And they said, "Right, well, there will be television crews from Moscow awaiting your arrival in the thing." And so we arrived late. We got stuck in some mud. I'm covered in oil from head to foot pretty well. I do 3 interviews for Moscow television, where really only one person there actually speaks English, who poses the question. Everything else is done in Russian. I have no idea what's going on. Did the interviews. We left Russia, I think, for the final time about probably 2 weeks later. And there was an article that said that the Russian parliament was drafting legislation for a 4-day week. Now, at that point, you realize that this is bigger than anything else that you could ever have imagined. And then we found, in the New York Times, we were the second most read story after the Trump-Putin summit. Or you then find that, when Congressman Mark Takano dropped a bill into Congress last year in the United States, held the last bastion of overwork, is citing us as an inspiration for why he's dropping the bill. They're not funny stories particularly, but my goodness me, it was a quiet moment of pause, that this was not the journey we expected to be on. Nobody in a wildest dreams could have believed that this would be where we are today. And so, as I said, you don't get many chances to change the world. It just so happens, it looks like there is a real chance that we are going to change the world. We've got legislation now of some form in Japan, India, Russia. We've got 4-day weeks in Belgium, Romania, Lithuania. We've got government-sponsored trials in Iceland, in Spain, in Ireland. We've got the UAE moving to a 4-day week. Last week, Sri Lanka announced they were moving to a 4-day week. Portugal has said that they're looking to do the same. And this is extraordinary, right?
Phenomenal.
And then there was a bill put into California. I don't know if it got through, but about reduced hours working. This is this is changing the world, one company, one country at a time.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I found this story, I think, a few months ago when I first reached out. And I'm talking about this to everyone, and I really, really believe that yeah, you and your partner are having great impact in the world with this initiative. It is something that is really, really needed, and that can make the world a better place. I didn't hear you mentioning Italy. I'm originally from Italy. And I was talking 5 minutes ago on the phone with my friend, and she said, "Oh, ask him, ask him about Italy."
Well, look, I mean, here's the thing. In the World Economic Forum debated a 4-day week again last week. The European Economic Forum debated 4-day week 3 weeks ago. There are conversations starting to happen at the European level. We had a meeting with some MEPs a few weeks ago. So look, I think the reality is that Europe knows about this. I mean, you look at Holland, it has an average working week of, I think, about 26 hours. The Nordic countries, in general terms, have got shorter working. But I think that it's not yet penetrated in Southern Europe, other than Spain. So Valencia are doing an experiment, the Spanish government's doing an experiment. But I've spoken in Turkey and Greece in the last couple of weeks. You know, it's moving through everywhere in Europe. It's starting to have that conversation. We're going to be launching in Germany fairly shortly. So it's coming to a country near you at some point in time. And look, it will come. I mean, we are, you know, we're happy to work with people anywhere in the world to put in place a campaign in their country. But I think the reality, I think this is an issue because of its impact, that we're going to see action at a European level, I think, before long. There are sufficient countries in Europe now moving across to this type of working arrangement. I think it's going to hit Italy sometime soon. If people gather together and start agitating for it, we can get a campaign up and running, you know, sooner rather than later, I think.
Yeah, I will put the message across. So before the last question, if anyone would like to get in touch with you or find more information about the 4 days working week, where they can contact you and how?
Well, go to the website. I mean, the website has got all the contact details. So www.4dayweek.com, the number 4. Go there first. I mean, that's got a lot of good on it. You know, do some basic research, and then if you need to reach out and contact us, then either, you know, to myself or to Joe O'Connor, who is our global CEO now, you know, get on the process. And that's, you know, it's a great community. It is a community where the generosity of organizations that have come onto the 4-day week, you know, people are always happy to share their experiences and always happy to give advice. So, you know, I think we're all part of something pretty special now. So website's the best place to start.
Mm. And really the last question that we usually ask to every guest, based on this amazing journey you've done with the 4 days working week, if you could give yourself a piece of advice, what would you say to your younger self?
Well, you know, I think it is this issue about you don't get many chances to change the world. You know, who'd have thought that just by doing this, what on its face was a small thing, it would more. So I think that the answer is I was far too timid as a young man, and far too cautious. Partly a function of my upbringing. You know, my parents were you know, from the war generation. At the same time, both of them had experienced, in one way, a loss of a parent, and another one, you know, social deprivation, because my grandfather had been unemployed for a long time. So they were very, very cautious, and I was too cautious for too long. And I think if I knew then what I knew now, I would have told my younger self to be a lot bolder, a lot more ambitious, and, you know, to just get on with it and take the risks.
Well, thank you, Andrew, so much for joining us today and sharing your inspirational story and wisdom with our listeners. And the last message.
Thank you very much.
And the last message for our listeners, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and tune in next week for a new inspirational episode of the Career Changers. Thank you.